a privilege to, privilege to learn, more than, share. I'm happy to share what I have, but I'm more than that, happy to learn what other presenters have to say. So thank you for the opportunity. And I have a tendency to kind of go little off tangent very quick. So I would just I kept like a 5 6 slides, just kept myself organized and share with you guys, and then kind of go through the presentations. I would just quickly share that, and then we'll just present the content I have to share with respect to the Jainism. And let me know when you guys can see the presentation. Awesome. All right. So as introduced, I'm Gaurav Jain. I based out of Virginia. It's been almost I think 15 years in the country, basically, and I'm part of a community, small community. It's called International Digambar Jain Organization. So I'm kind of one of the member of the organization. We recently like a year back, we have inaugurated our new temple in this region. Beautiful temple. If anybody local or traveling, IAD, one of the big airport, happy to have you guys visit the temple and learn and understand more about our religion culture. So that's just my introduction. Um, Basically, I'm going to start with the philosophy and the belief of Jainism, and of course, one of the minority at that time. But we just want to share the principles and what are the beliefs. And happy to, you guys can feel free to drop a question in the chat. And if I get a time and I get a thing and can pick it up, or we can always talk about it in one-on-one sessions and like the separate breakouts, whatever it goes. So, what is Jainism? Basically, there are so many ways to describe Jainism, but what I feel, and kind of maybe if I have to say in few words, what is Jainism, then basically that's first thing comes in is the self-realization is Jainism. Like it's all about ourself and not about outside. Um, One can do the self-realization by just understanding oneself and truly believing in it. And what out there is basically in all the literature kind of concentrates on basically how do you find your own self? How do you identify what you are, and how do you focus on that? And basically, that's pretty much is what Jainism is. So we'll go slowly, try to cover from different perspectives over the slides. So basically, um, what are the ways? Like basically, we talk about what are the ways to identify yourself. We describe them in very high-level terms. There are basically two things. One is called dravya, and it's basically you can say a material in English. Dravya is basically an Hindi word, but there are six type of materials because somebody says like, for example, if you want to find a diamond, how would you find a diamond from the bunch of crystals or the glass pieces? To understand realize what is the diamond, you need to know the characteristics of the diamond so that you can find basically how is diamond different than any of the other glass pieces. Basically, so that's what the six dravya or six materials comes in, which talks about like shape of the diamond. How does it look, and what are the different qualities of it, so that you can truly identify the diamond. So in this case, in our case, the diamond is our own self, our soul. And how do you identify the soul? How do you really see that? You need to understand what are the true qualities of the soul, and how do we focus on it, right? So that's a six dravyas, and there are seven tattvas, which is basically describes various state of the soul based on different characteristics or the way you look at it, right? So that's where sometimes get very kind of confusing if you just say, okay, you need to identify the soul without understanding how do we do that. You know, how can I focus on? So ultimately, that's where when you learn about those six dravya and seven tattvas, you actually try to understand how the soul is different than anything else, and how do we focus on it. And we'll touch base on that a little bit in this chapter, or basically in the slides. But I would just want to move ahead with the next one. So Jainism believe in godhood, definitely, but it does not believe that God to be the first cause. um, God is not a creator, preserver, or destroyer of the universe. That's a firm belief inside Jainism. Basically, the God does not punish anyone, it doesn't reward anyone. Each person, and very important part, each person is responsible for improving their life by their own endeavor. And each soul is capable of achieving godhood by realizing the true potential within. So, what we talk about is each soul, whether the soul is a soul of a human being, or a soul of an animal, or a soul of an insect, every single soul is equal. Every single soul is equal, and every single soul has the capability to become a God. So that's basically our fundamental belief. And basically, that's once we understand that part, the other things evolve from there, basically. Like we have this thing like, okay, Jains are vegetarian, yes, but why? The true concept there comes from understanding if each and every soul is equal, and every soul has the same capabilities as a human being or somebody else, then the main fundamental of ahimsa, which is non-violence, comes in, right? How can you, if you truly believe in that each soul is equal, and um, whether it's insect soul or animal soul or a human being soul, then you would never hurt them, because you know that they are all same. So uh, basically, that's the fundamental principle in Jainism. Now, what I just want to touch base on a little bit more on the life, where he says, okay, Jainism categorized life in five forms basically, and we call them senses, right? So, and if you can see there are two things. One is this pyramid, and then other one is this sheet I put together. Basically, what we are talking about, a total of five senses, which is touch, taste, smell, eyes, and ear. Basically, like listening ability and visualization, right? And basically, so each life has either of them. It can be either simply touch, like trees, or a human being, which has all five of them. So there are life which is being distributed across all these five lives. There are some special things which is like human being, for example. It also comes with the it's called, I don't know how do I say in English, but it's called man, basically, which is more than the mind. It's not just the mind, but we'll not dwell into it for now, but we'll just keep it simple for understanding purpose, that these are the senses. And if you look at this pyramid, is basically when we talk about we being vegetarian, or being basically saving the lives, or mindful of what we are doing in our daily to daily activities, or what we actually think about, is basically going in this direction that, you know uh, first of all, each and every life is sacred, but it's it's nearly impossible to save every single life, including, let's say, the small trees, or something. When you are, let's say, constructing the house, right? When you're gonna or some you ask somebody to build a house for you, you're gonna hurt like small insects or small lives. So, but those lives are equally same as our life. So the concept is that, okay, there are things which you can do, there are things which you cannot do or cannot avoid while living in this world. So that's where this degree of or pyramid comes in, where you say, okay, you know what? This is like, absolutely sacred. Uh, Pretty much everything is sacred, but there are some which you cannot avoid. Like for example, like if you are building a house, you have to cut the grass or you have to dig the hole. There may be insects living, and you may end up killing them, but it's not. You're still mindful about it and trying to take your decisions based on basically understanding of that. It's the same thing. So ultimately, all lives are sacred. They were living in peace and harmony essential, and that's our fundamental goal: is ahimsa paramo dharma. Which means ahimsa is basically non-violence, and that's the true true dharma or religion from crux of it, basically. So we just want to touch this. I know it's probably taking too much time on the first slide, but I'll try to cover it up. So we move on to the next one. These are like basically, if you look around or internet or the documentation and stuff, you will see these type of symbols very often. I just wanted to quickly get into what those means. Why do we have them? What's the ultimate goal? So if you see this, I mean, it may look like a little, you may have seen different type of sign. This which is more tilted on, I guess, but then this one is the Jane sign, which is basically these four, if you can say the square or like the lines, they represent basically the four states of the any soul, let's say. So they basically this is called, first of all, swastika. It symbolizes the continuous cycle of birth, suffering, and death, and the four life forms shown. So the four life shown, this is heaven, human, hell, and animal. So they're like four different life, which pretty much every single soul keep rotating in this. After death, they get birth into a different, they can be like, the human can become animal, animal can become human, in after that. And that's kind of a like non-stop circle which keeps going on in four direction. Now, what is the ultimate happiness path, and how would we achieve that? And that's where basically this whole, if you see on the top, this is the ultimate happiness, where you get out of this non-ending birth and death cycle. And how do we achieve that? How do we get out of this non-ending death and birth cycle? Is basically by following these three concepts. One called Samyak Darshan, right faith; Samyak Gyan, right knowledge; and Samyak Charat, right conduct. So those three things helps achieving this ultimate goal, which is enlightenment. And this is where basically all the life, death, birth ends. There's no more birth or death or suffering. Ultimate place where everybody want to be. Because ultimately, if you get birth, starting from birth until you die, there are sufferings all over the time, in whatever form it may be, but there are sufferings. So if you get out of those suffering, that's the ultimate place to be. Um, so that's basically one of the James symbol. The other one, this hand signifies the stop and think before you act. So if you are doing whatever you're doing, it's kind of symbolizing the stop, think before you do that, and try to avoid possible violence, as I mentioned in the previous one as well, that the degree of violence that you possibly want to avoid. The wheel, which is right here, symbolizes a reincarnation cycle, which is death and birth, and death and birth happening for like infinite times and continue to be there in infinite times. The 24 spokes here, they represents the preaching from the 24 Tirthankaras, which are enlightened souls, who basically are out of this never-ending circle. They are enlightened and they're sitting here. That's what it represents. And the word in the center of the wheel called ahimsa, which is non-violence. And that's pretty much is the two symbols. There are more, but I just picked two for this purpose, just to kind of focus on a few important ones. Moving on quickly, the history, the Jainism history and timeline is infinite. It's basically there's no like starting point, in any ages. So like from as per Jainism, we are living in a fifth age, but there are a total of six. And then once fifth age finishes, the sixth will come in, and then we start back from six to five, four, three, two, one, and one, two again back. So that's how it rotates all the time. Now, Jainism has been there forever. That's our belief. Jainism has infinite gods, but there are only 24 Tirthankaras. And those 24 Tirthankaras for current age, each age or time frame would have their 24 Tirthankaras. But the current ones which we are living in is the first Tirthankar, who's called Adinath or Sabnath. He has three names, known to have lived for 593 times 10s to the power 18 years. This is the age of first Tirthankar, like how and the time he lived, it was like long time ago, like millions of billions of years ago. He lived. He was the first Tirthankara. It's still part of this age. Um, He's attained entitlement from Mount Kailash, Ashtapad. That's called. It's a northern part of India. A place called Ashtapad. That's we believe he got enlightenment. Mount Kailash is basically a big.
Jama?
Sorry.
Susan, did you have a? Oh, sorry.
Maybe there was this. Okay.
I think it was an accident.
Sorry. Yeah, just remind me of time, please. I don't want to take away somebody else's time.
Yes, thank you. Yes, you have about 2 minutes left.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. So that's basically the first Tirthankaras, and then we have a 24th Tirthankara who's more known. He's called Mahavir. He's known across. He lived in this time, which is 599 to 527 BC. He lived for 72 years. Basically, what we believe that over the time, the age of individual has decreased. So when we talk about the first Tirthankara, he lived for millions of years or countless years versus Tirthankara Mahavir lived only for 72 years. Same time as Gautam Buddha, he attained enlightenment from Pavapuri. So that's just the getting a little bit of history. Then we got multiple acharyas. I'm not gonna get into details, but from zeroth CE, Kundukunda Acharya believed to be the first one from this. Not first, I should say. In this after CE, he was more popular one. He wrote a lot of literature in different languages, and we kind of translated over the times, and coming down to us basically to read about them. Then there was a second one, Uma Shami Acharya, who was very famous, who talked about seven tattvas. I think somebody was telling me that there are like probably 40 different PhDs has been done on one single book he wrote. Basically is based on this particular one book, which talks about just the seven tattvas, which I talked in the beginning. So lot of history there. And sorry, I will try to go a little fast now. From the literature point of view, we basically quantify or categorize our literature in primarily based on two things, which is Anekant and Syadvad. Anekant is nothing but like perspectives, and Syadvad is how do you explain those perspectives in a different form, which are basically accepted in a way. So Anekant is basically we always believe there are always multiple perspectives. Everybody have their perspective of looking at things, and then we believe in learning from each other and basically believing in their perspectives as well. And then we basically classify our all the literature in four different groups based on the perspectives. And this is basically more whether it's somebody's talking about it from the stories or from more tattva's perspective, karma's perspective, or the conduct perspective. So there are like four major categories of the literature. We talk about again there are five sins and there are code of conduct, which is basically if you are doing hinsa, which is violence, that's one of the sin. But if you are not doing that, and basically that conduct for all who believe in Jainism, that these are the code of conduct that you need to do or be mindful of, which is ahimsa, satya, acharya, which is non-violence, truthfulness, non-stealing, chastity, non-possession, and there's a degree of each. So the saints have much higher degree than the people who live in household and living our life as a normal, like not saints basically. So that's like how much is the degree is based on that. These 5 code of conducts for us. There are 4 passions: anger, ego, deceit, and greed. We think the greed is the source of all the sins, which is basically greed is inversely proportionate to happiness. As much as greed you have, less happy you are. And we can kind of go more in detail, And this is basically just picked up few teaching of Lord Mahavir. All the souls are independent, none depends on another. All the souls are alike, no one is superior or inferior, and every soul is omniscient and blissful. The bliss doesn't come from outside, it always comes from within. Not only soul, but every object of the universe is also subject to change by itself without any external interference. One who, even after knowing the whole universe, can remain unaffected and unattached is God. So they know everything, but as I said, they don't do anything. They just know and they remain unattached to anything. That's what our gods are. Um, Following the principle of Jainism, one can attain extreme happiness by get rid of infinite cycle of birth and death. Uh, and the principles like detachment and reduction of passion can improve the overall life. Even though if you don't want to get enlightenment, still it can help the life tremendously if you learn about those or want to learn about those concepts and practice them. Um, this is like I just wanted to call out few of the places. If somebody say, "Hey, I want to learn about Jainism, but I don't know where to begin." There are few places in India which are, let's say, we consider them our top list. This is like a 9 kilometer like a walk upwards, 9 kilometer on the horizontal, 9 come back, so 27 kilometer circle, which a lot of Jain they just do go every year. They just go, and these are the, you can see small temples on the mountain. And we consider, like, out of 24 Tirthankaras, 20 of them actually got enlightenment for here, and that's truly sacred place for us. This is another temple from 10th century. There's a huge idol of Lord Bahubali from Gomateshwar, Karnataka in India in 9th century. It was built in by Chandragupta Maurya. He was the king of that region at the time. And there's another place in Rajasthan. I mean, there are plenty of them out there, really historic places, just to look at the historical point of view. Um, I hope I haven't taken too much time, but this is it for me. But happy to have one-on-one another discussion with you guys later.
Thank you so much, Gaurav. I think everybody very much appreciated your presentation and are looking forward to being able to talk with you further in the small groups.
Awesome.
With that, I would like to turn to Mariam Ovisi. Mariam?
Hello, you can all hear me? Yes, okay. So I'm representing the spiritual but not religious category. So I'm going to kind of start with a little bit of a personal and then get into some bigger frameworks. And I will also share in the chat after my presentation an amazing research study by the Pew Center on this category that we're speaking about in spirituality in America. So I want to just acknowledge that I'm coming to you from Northern Virginia, the land of Manahoac. My birthland is Iran, and the birth home of some of the spiritual wisdom that I'll be sharing with you is in India. I define myself as a spiritual human being, a mystic seeker of these times, interested in the ultimate journey to the seat of the heart and connection to the profound well of love that is within myself, and I believe in all of us. I'm interested in questions and not absolute answers. I'm interested to see how the human spirit finds ways, defines relationships. Dogma has not proven to be useful to me. I hope my presentation today offers a doorway into the ultimate spiritual inquiry, which I believe is a relationship between matter and energy. This is a spiritual endeavor. Often fields of work where you work to explore and understand matter like biology, and maybe work and explore the world of energy like physics, can also be seen as inherently spiritual pursuits. And I'm fortunate that both in my human experience and in my professional path of service, I invite this relationship whereby both matter and energy are to be questioned, explored in the pursuit of well-being. Notice I speak of energy versus spirit. You are welcome to use those terms interchangeably. I started in the arms of Christianity during my high school years. Interested in spiritual inquiry, I began a religious club in high school, inviting people of all faiths to come and talk and connect, very much like today. I studied the Bible earnestly with dozens of study groups, as well as study of it in the original language of Aramaic. And the more questions I asked, the more various communities, church communities, would ask me to stop asking them. And along the way, yoga was introduced to me. And I found the container of meditation to be my greatest space of inquiry, clarity, and understanding. Have you ever heard of the overview effect? It's a phenomenon when astronauts go into space and they view the Earth and they basically have a transcendent experience. And what hallmarks that is that there's a profound sense of overwhelming emotion and then a deep connection to humankind, that spiritual experience. And this really is exactly what happens in meditation. And it's what the rishis, and the rishis are kind of mystic teachers. This precedes really organized religion in India, the Vedas, and they talk about kind of this creating space in the heart, and that this brings healing. And in my belief, I believe healing is a spiritual endeavor. There's a line from the Munduka Upanishad, and these are writings from about 3,000 to 5,000. It says, bright but hidden, the self dwells in the heart. Everything that moves, breathes, opens, closes, lives in the self. It is the source of love and may be known through love, but not through thought. I applied the same earnest study that I did to Christian texts, and I now applied it to sacred texts of Indian philosophy, from the Vedas to the Sutras, from the Upanishads to the Gita. I found a lot of clarity in mystic traditions. A modern mystic invites contemplation as a form of both absorption and transcendence. Yoga is a non-theistic path. It's a path that provides tools to quiet the mind and feel into the states of connection and integration, samadhi, all while respecting the individual faith traditions. This makes sense. India is a land of many faiths. Even in Hinduism, householders choose different paths of worship: Vaishnavites, Shiva, Shakti-based traditions, Durga, Krishna. This is why yoga philosophy was so interesting to me. One of the 6 philosophical schools of thought called darshan in Sanskrit. That's how these schools of thought are referred to. And the word darshan itself means mirror. And it's basically like, it's a way of viewing yourself in relationship to matter and energy, and in a path of getting to understand our true self. And the darshan of yoga is based on the darshan of Sankhya, and both are non-theistic. And the interest is to alleviate suffering through processes of self-mastery and well-being. The sense of yoga, which also can be in our language of English, of yoking or connecting, has 4 paths of spiritual exploration, in my opinion. So the first path is, there's a path through, and it's all about connection. The first is through connection to nature, is to come back in relationship to nature and its cycles. The second is through connection to the true self, maybe called the soul, with these questions of who am I? What is my purpose? The third path of connection is through divinity, through your own belief system. And the fourth is through the connection to transcendence, that we are not separate from spirit and matter and the states of oneness and integration. And if we put a little modern lens of why perhaps these psychedelics are and these mushrooms are being used in healing PTSD and depression, is because there's a doorway that opens to transcendence. And in that experience, there's a cascade of neurotransmitters that shifts in the body. And that those neurotransmitters, to a certain extent, can be seen as energy, creating this state of connection and upliftment. At the heart of spirituality is connection and meaning. My spiritual life led me to devote my work to sharing yoga. I'm a yoga therapist. I work at Innova Life with Cancer at the Shard Cancer Institute, working bedside, chairside in oncology. And about 20 years ago, I also opened a yoga sanctuary in Northern Virginia to foster a space of connection, study, and growth, basically testing the ability for people to have spiritually rich lives with or without religion. I believe religion is not a necessity. Spirituality is essential. In the last decade, many frameworks in healthcare have shifted to whole person care. In 2023, I was seeing the explicit inclusion of spirituality in many of these models of care. In my own book, Care of the Whole Self, I shared a multi-dimensional model, and I did not divide out spirituality, but recognize it as a state of integration of oneself, physically, energetically, mentally, sensually, emotionally. In August 2023, Dr. Langevin of NCCIH, branch of NIH, wrote in her monthly newsletter, acquiring a sense of connection, meaning, and purpose is a part of spiritual growth. Patients who experience a severe trauma or life-threatening illness, such as cancer, often describe a renewed sense of appreciation for life. She continues to write, looking ahead, it will be important to better understand how spiritual interconnectedness can be strengthened through basic biological mechanisms of practices that focus on expanding awareness, such as meditation and other traditional healing practices. In 2023, the Veterans Health Administration Office of Patient-Centered Care and Cultural Transformation placed spirituality front and center in their whole health patient care model. I'm happy to put any links that will give you direct access to both of these items that I'm speaking about and quoting. And in this handout, there's a pretty significant handout called an Introduction to Spirit and Soul for Whole Health. And they define spirituality as our experience of how we relate to whatever is greater than ourselves and gives meaning to our lives. It is an experience unique to each person. At the same time, it involves how we are connected to one another. And I will add, as well as to nature. In conclusion, today, I want to say that my interest in spirituality is not only for the individual, but also for the collective. The more that we understand that the well-being of ourselves and our planet is related, perhaps we will see that we must place aside the ideas of separateness and the ideas that profess this is the only way, and simply meet one another in this remembrance that the Rig Veda offers us. The Rig Veda is a very significant text. It's one of the oldest, the Vedas are one of the oldest texts, and they're Hinduism, it's inspired from it. Hopefully you'll hear from someone today, they'll speak to it, but it's not an organized text for that faith. And in this text is a collection of writing, very famous, in English is called the Hymns of Creation. And it basically kind of speaks to, it's a very mystic text that speaks to, like, there's no interest in like, how did this all come to be? Like, matter and energy is. But this one line I want to share with you, that in the beginning, love arose, which was the primal germ cell of the mind, the seers, searching in their hearts with wisdom, discovered the connection of being and non-being. In philosophy and in Indian thought, there's a process called negation, called neti neti. Not this, not this. And we sometimes know something by knowing what it is not. And perhaps we ask ourselves, not, am I spiritual? But how am I not spiritual? Can laying in a field of blooming bluebells be a spiritual experience? Can watching the ocean breathe be a spiritual experience? And can these micro moments of connection invite transcendence that can transform our human experience? I leave you with questions, as that is the path of myself as a seeker. And I just invite that we take a few breaths together to just bring ourselves into a space of connection in this moment, and maybe consider that this can be on its own a spiritual moment of transcendence. Turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Mariam. I would like to continue with Kirsi Shroff.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Kirsi Shroff from the metropolitan area of Washington, D.C. I'm privileged to accept the invitation by IFC to come and speak about Zoroastrianism. I, together with my community in Washington, have been associated with the IFC right from early days under the leadership of the late, great Clark Lobenstein, and through Rabbi Jerry Sirota, and now to our very own Dr. Susan Abadia. So I'm here to speak as a member of the Zoroastrian community in North America. Zoroastrians being those adherents of the faith who have relatively recently arrived from Iran and the subcontinent of India and Pakistan. In India, the country where the majority of Zoroastrians live, they are known by their ethnic identity as the Parsis. It admittedly will seem very odd for me to introduce Zoroastrianism, a faith that arose in ancient Iran some 1500 or so years before the Christian era, on a very contemporary note. But my purpose in doing so is to show that Zoroastrianism continues to convey its still relevant teachings into modern times. In the Hollywood movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, the director Stanley Kubrick purposely picked Richard Strauss' masterpiece, Das Sprach Zarathustra, as the background music to introduce the theme of human evolution. The Zarathustra, named in the title of the piece, is the original name of the Iranian prophet, later called Zoroaster by the Greeks, hence the references to Zoroastrians and Zoroastrianism. In the movie, based on a science fiction novel by Arthur C. Clarke, a mysterious monolith triggers the evolution of apes into humans and later spurs the further evolution of man into something new, like a star child. A writer has summed up the message of the film as man is a rope stretched between the animal and the Superman. By bringing in Strauss's eponymously titled music, Kubrick thus acknowledged the Zoroastrian theme of creating a progressive or a perfecting world. The core of Zoroastrian teachings and values are for mankind to use their intellectual prowess, the good mind, thus emphasizing the mental element, to choose good over evil, to establish order over chaos, and to progressively renovate the world and to strive towards its perfection. Zoroastrians believe in one God, Ahura Mazda, a supreme God who is the father of the ordered cosmos. mankind too is recognized to have been created with many divine attributes. Zoroaster's teachings, orally conveyed in the then traditional form of divine hymns or poetry called the Gathas, enunciate solemn principles for establishing order in the universe. In the 5 Gathas, exhortations are made for the gaining of truth and wisdom, to remove darkness and violence, and to establish light and love. The Gathas are rendered in an ancient language called Avesta. A principal teaching in the Gathas is for mankind to choose which of the 2 paths, good or evil, to follow in life, and to bear individual responsibility for the consequences of the choice. Thus, religious commitment is viewed as an act of individual reflection, the freedom to choose the path to follow in life, and to present before God a life worthy of personal salvation. Zoroastrianism is not a prescriptive religion. The Spirit of God is within all mankind, that recognizes in each one of us the presence of the good Spirit, imbued with love and consideration for others. Zoroastrianism urges mankind to lead a life of altruism, others first, and to avoid misunderstandings and violence. Zoroaster's teachings were revolutionary for their times and shifted the focus from the tribal to the individual, making religious commitment based not on birth within a tribe or a community, but on individual choice and actions. So, Zoroastrians believe in the eventual triumph of justice and of the victory of good over evil. So the struggle between good and evil that continues to rage in our world allows me to end on another contemporary note. In our presently fractious world, when one nation speaks of the great Satan and the other denounces the empire of evil, it is tempting for me to say, "Das sprach Zarathustra." Thank you. A wide-ranging sweep from the ancient to the modern within the 7 minutes allotted to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kirsi. And now we're going to have our final speaker before we break into small groups. Tahil, go ahead, please.
Thanks so much, Simi. I appreciate it. Can you hear me clearly? Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Tahil Sharma, and I serve as the regional coordinator for North America at the United Religions Initiative. But I happen to actually come from an interreligious background. My father's side of the family is Hindu, and my mother's side of the family is Sikh. But today I'll be taking the opportunity to present to you about Sikhi, or what you all know as Sikhism. Sikhism is considered one of the younger religions of the world, only having a history of a little over 500 years. Originally, it didn't have the intention to become a religion based on the founder Guru Nanak, who was born in the town of Talwandi, which is now in what is known as Pakistan. And he started off as being born into a Hindu working class family who had this very natural curiosity towards wisdom and faith and its relationship to the existence of all things and our relationship to all things. And from a young age began asking questions about why people are different, why do they engage in different practices? If people are so dedicated to God, why is there inequity in the world? And those questions kept growing for him until he became a young adult. And at the age of 33, he actually disappeared for 3 days. He was said to have gone to do a swim in a local lake, and having disappeared for 3 days and no one knowing his existence, he was seen once again as a completely changed man. And he started off by uttering these words of "Na koi Hindu, na koi Musalman," which means no one is at their core a Hindu or a Muslim, which was challenging the rhetoric of separations of faith traditions and the separation of supremacy of those within their faith traditions to those who were not as well off in society. Guru Nanak started this practice of improving people from the tradition that they were based in, which was based on three very important values. Nam Japana, which means to remember and utter the name of God at all times. Vandike Shakna, which means to share all that you make as an opportunity to help others in need. And Kirat Karna, to live an honest, hardworking life. Within those three universal principles, he really dedicated himself to really pushing back against the material and the hierarchical natures of the society that he was growing up in, and wanted to make sure that people understand that this was not about him making a religion, but challenging the perceptions of where people's faith was actually focused, which was more on material presentations to God, showing that people are just better based on their status and power and wealth in society, and was not fully dedicated to this idea of serving mankind and the earth around you. And because of that, he started this practice back in the late 16th, early 17th century, which allowed him to be able to actually engage in the practice of an understanding of a pluralistic universal God that encompasses all of us. One that focuses on our ability to create community that we serve and to fight for the dignity and justice of others. His lineage of guruship extended to 9 additional people, who established different precedents and traditions within our faith that allow us to be able to extend that practice of faith, service, and hardworking nature to help all in need. And it ended with actually the 10th Guru, Guru Gobind Singh Ji, who actually established an induction process to folks into what is known as the Khalsa Panth. The Khalsa Panth is sort of our way of doing what is an initiation into the community, which could be similar to a baptism, but it's open to everyone and it's done consensually on the permission of those that are adults. And this commitment is what actually formed into what we now see as the Sikh religion, which has the establishment of wearing as a part of its sort of identity marker, a kada, which is steel bangles, which you see me wearing on screen. And many folks who actually grow out their hair as a part of the mandate of the tradition that is usually tied up in a dastar or a turban. Throughout the centuries, we've noted that this community has grown, in a limited way where over 80% of the population still remains in India. But even in the United States, it does actually have a population of about 1% of the US population that is spread out throughout different parts of the United States, particularly places on the West and East Coast, because of the history of immigration into the United States during the late 19th century. To Angel and Ellis Island. And in addition to the 70s and the 80s in the 20th century, to when many Sikhs came traveling in following the Civil Rights Act and the ending of, quotas of folks of South Asian descent. And because of this, we now see a more thriving community of Sikhs that exist throughout the United States and throughout North America. But we do have to note that there are some disparities in how the religion is often associated with Islam and Hinduism by association, by association of perceived understandings of faith traditions and their outward looks versus perceived beliefs and the shared histories of Hinduism, Sikhism, and now what we know as, Hinduism and Sikhism and now what we know, Hinduism and Islam and now what we know as Sikhism. And I think it's important for us to consider that there are these clear identity markers that I've mentioned, but that there are sort of inclusive needs to understand that there is a pluralistic approach to how Sikhs understand God. and it remains that way. Those of any faith tradition can enter our space, not just to find safety and security, but if they need a place to pray and if they also need a place to eat. Sikhi is based on this very famous tradition of langar, or free community kitchen, that feeds all those in need. And it's an important place for folks to remember that those that pray together can also eat together. So this centuries-old tradition of being able to feed everyone from all walks of life, and when greeted in the temple, are immediately served a hot vegetarian Indian meal, usually of a Punjabi sort of context, reminds us of both the nature of how we engage God in faithful ways in a sanctuary, but how we also engage God in every living thing that exists and every part of what is our reality, including the food we eat. So this is my way of sort of summarizing in 7 minutes what the experience and identity of Sikhism is, and how, you know, I practice it as an individual can be a part of the questions that you ask later. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Tahil. Thank you again to all of our wonderful faith practitioners. We are now going to break into small groups. I encourage you to use this opportunity to ask questions, to bring up any thoughts that may have been sparked by all of these wonderful presentations, and to make the most of this opportunity that you have to get to speak with these different faith practitioners. So just hang on 1 minute, and Geneva will be moving you into your different groups.